I noticed the crying first. Not loud sobs, just that quiet kind that happens when someone thinks they're alone. My wife was standing at the sink, staring at a pile of dishes she'd already washed. It was 9:40 p.m. Tuesday. When I reached for the trash to help her, something plastic caught my eye, a pregnancy test. Positive. Dated last month. My hands went cold. We're both 62. I didn't say anything right away. That's the first thing you should know about me. I've always been the type to pause, to think things through before opening my mouth. 38 years of marriage teaches you that words once said can't be put back. My wife, Ellen, kept rinsing the same plate under running water, her shoulders stiff, her breathing uneven. I stood there holding the trash bag like it weighed 100 pounds. "Ellie," I said finally, keeping my voice calm. "You okay?" She flinched, just slightly, like she hadn't heard me come in. Then she turned, wiped her face quickly with the back of her hand, and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, just tired. Long day." That answer would have worked yesterday. Or last year. But not tonight. Not with that test burned into my mind. I nodded anyway. That's what men my age do when they don't want to start a fire they're not ready to put out. I tied the trash bag and carried it out to the bin, my heart pounding like I'd just run up a flight of stairs. Outside the night was quiet. Suburban quiet. The kind where porch lights glow and everyone's pretending everything inside their homes is normal. I stood there longer than necessary, staring at the lid of the trash can, replaying what I'd seen. Positive, pink lines. Clear as day, pink lines. Clear as day, and the date printed on the wrapper. Last month, we hadn't been intimate in over a year. Not since her doctor adjusted her medication and said it was normal at her age. When I went back inside, Ellen was sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. I took my seat across from her. We'd raised 2 kids at that table, paid bills, planned vacations, argued, made up, built a life. "Ellie," I said again, softer now, "we need to talk." Her eyes flicked up to mine. For a split second I saw fear. Real fear. Then it vanished, replaced by something practiced. "Can it wait till tomorrow? I've got a headache." I thought about pushing. I thought about slamming the test on the table and demanding answers. But something told me not to. "Not yet." Instead, I said, "All right. Tomorrow." She stood up immediately, relief washing over her face too quickly. "I'm going to bed," she said. "Don't stay up too late." "I won't," I lied. That night I barely slept. I lay there listening to the familiar sounds of our house. Every creak suddenly suspicious. Every silence too loud. Ellen lay beside me, facing away, her breathing steady, or at least pretending to be. At around 2:15 a.m., her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. She didn't move. I did. I didn't grab it. I just watched the screen light up and go dark again. No name, just a number. That was new. Ellen used to keep her phone face up, never cared who saw it. Lately, it lived face down or locked away in her purse. Another thing, I'd told myself not to notice. Morning came too fast, over coffee. Ellen acted normal. Too normal, talking about the weather, asking if I'd seen the neighbor's new truck. I watched her like I'd never seen her before, searching for cracks. When she went to shower, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked the trash can again. The bag from last night was gone. I waited until she left for her volunteer shift at the community center. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the grocery store dumpster 2 blocks away. It was where we usually dropped extra trash on pickup days. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but I knew I wasn't. It took me 10 minutes to find the bag. Same knot, same contents. I opened it right there like a raccoon digging for scraps. The test was gone. Just the wrapper remained. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. I thought about our kids. Mark, 41, living in Ohio. Susan, 38, divorced, living nearby. I thought about how this would shatter them, how it would shatter me. At noon, my phone rang. It was Susan. "Dad," she said, her voice tight. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, automatically. "Why?" She hesitated. "Mom didn't show up for her shift today. They called me. She never misses." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, didn't show up? She just didn't come. And she's not answering her phone." I looked at the empty driveway. "I'll handle it," I said. "I'll call you back." I tried Ellen's number. Straight to voicemail. I drove to the community center. Her car wasn't there. I checked the pharmacy, the library. Nothing. When I got home, there was an envelope taped to the front door. My name on it, written in her handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, 3 sentences. "I'm sorry. I needed time. Please don't look for me." My hands shook as I folded it back up. That wasn't Ellen. She hated unfinished conversations. Hated uncertainty. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than I'd imagined. And it had started long before that pregnancy test ended up in our trash. I sat down, took a breath, and picked up the phone. There was one person I needed to call. Someone who could tell me what I didn't want to know. Her doctor. I called the doctor's office 3 times before someone finally answered. The receptionist recognized my name immediately, which unsettled me more than I expected. Her voice softened in that professional way people use when they know more than they're supposed to say. She told me the doctor was unavailable, but that she would leave a note. I asked what kind of note. She paused, then said, "About Ellen's recent visit." That was enough to tell me this wasn't new. I drove there anyway. I didn't call ahead again. I just walked into the clinic like a man who still believed he had a right to answers. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old magazines. I sat for 6 minutes. I counted every second. When the nurse finally called my name, she didn't smile. She led me into an office I'd never been in before, not the exam room Ellen usually talked about. The doctor came in and closed the door behind him. He didn't sit right away. That told me everything. "Mr. Harris," he said carefully, "I can't discuss your wife's medical details without her consent." I nodded. I'd expected that. "But," he continued, sitting down slowly, "I can answer one question if you ask it the right way." I swallowed. My throat felt tight. "Is my wife pregnant?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He folded his hands. Then he said, "The test she took last month was positive." The room felt smaller. My ears rang. "At her age," he went on, "it would be medically improbable without intervention." I leaned forward. "Intervention how?" I asked. He met my eyes. "Hormonal treatment, IVF. Or," he paused, "another explanation." "What explanation?" I said. He hesitated again. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "patients present test results that aren't theirs." I felt something cold move through me. "Are you saying the test wasn't Ellen's?" I asked. He shook his head. "I'm saying she didn't complete any pregnancy follow-up. She canceled her appointment and asked for her records. That's all I can say." I left before he could say anything else. Outside, I sat in my car with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel. Ellen had never canceled appointments, never asked for records. She trusted doctors, trusted systems, trusted me, or at least she used to. I thought about the envelope on the door, about the way she'd avoided my eyes the night before, about the phone buzzing at 2:15 a.m. When I got home, Susan was waiting in the driveway. She stepped out of her car as soon as she saw me. "Dad," she said, worry etched deep into her face. "What's going on?" I held up the note. She read it silently. Then she looked up. "This isn't Mom," she said. "She wouldn't just disappear." I nodded. I know, I said. Which means she didn't do it alone. Susan crossed her arms. Do you think she's in trouble? She asked. I thought about lying. I didn't. I think she's hiding something, I said, and I think someone helped her. Susan hesitated, then said, There's something I didn't tell you. My chest tightened. Tell me now, I said. She took a breath. Last month, she said. Mom asked me if I'd ever consider having another child. I stared at her. What? Susan nodded. She said she'd been thinking about starting over. I thought it was just talk. She laughed it off when I questioned her. I felt dizzy. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Susan looked down. Because it sounded crazy, she said. And because she told me not to worry you. That night, I couldn't stay in the house. Every room felt wrong. I drove aimlessly until I found myself parked across from a small motel near the interstate. I didn't know why I stopped. Instinct, maybe, or desperation. I sat there watching cars come and go. At 11:47 p.m., a familiar sedan pulled into the lot, Ellen's car. I got out slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I walked like a man walking toward the truth, whether he wanted it or not. I saw her through the lobby window, standing at the counter, speaking quietly to the clerk. She looked smaller somehow, older when she turned and saw me. Her face drained of color. David, she said, barely above a whisper. You weren't supposed to find me, were you? I asked. She looked past me, toward the hallway. We need to talk, she said. Not here, I nodded. Then start talking, I said. Because I'm done guessing. She sat down heavily on one of the lobby chairs. Her hands trembled. The test wasn't mine, she said quickly. But it's my responsibility, I frowned. Whose was it? I asked. She closed her eyes. Susan's, she said. The word hit me like a punch. What? I said. Ellen opened her eyes, tears spilling over. She didn't know what to do, she said. She was scared, and I thought I could fix it. My heart raced. Fix it how? I demanded. Ellen looked up at me, broken. By making it disappear, she said. And that was when I realized this wasn't a secret about life. It was a secret about something far worse. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step closer. I just stood there, staring at my wife like I was seeing her for the first time. The lobby felt too quiet, like the air itself was waiting to hear what she would say next. What do you mean make it disappear? I asked. My voice sounded calm, but I didn't feel calm. I felt hollow. Ellen wiped her face with trembling fingers. Susan didn't want the baby, she said. She said she couldn't do it again. Another divorce. Another child alone. She panicked. I shook my head slowly. So you panicked for her? I asked. Ellen looked down. I thought I was protecting her, she said. I thought I was protecting all of us. I sat down across from her. My knees felt weak. You ran away, I said. You left a note, like you were the one in danger. Ellen nodded. I am in danger, she said quietly. Just not the kind you're thinking. That made my stomach tighten. Explain, I said. She took a deep breath. The father isn't who Susan told you she was dating, she said. It's someone she works with. Someone married. I closed my eyes. I could already feel the consequences stacking up. Does he know? I asked. Ellen hesitated. He knows now, she said. That's why I'm here. I leaned forward. Why would that put you in danger? I asked. Ellen finally looked at me. Because I took the test, she said. I took it from Susan and threw it away. I thought if there was no proof he'd leave her alone. My heart pounded. And did he? I asked. Ellen shook her head. No, she said. He followed me instead. I felt a chill run through me. Followed you how? I asked. Ellen glanced toward the hallway again. He saw me leave Susan's place, she said. He saw me throw the test away. He knows I know. I clenched my fists. What does he want? I asked. Ellen's voice broke. He wants silence, she said. And he wants control. I stood up slowly. We're leaving, I said. Ellen looked startled. David, no, she said. You don't understand. I met her eyes. I understand enough, I said. You don't stay alone in places like this when someone's watching you. She hesitated, then nodded. We walked out together, side by side like we always had, even when things were broken, in the car. Ellen finally spoke again. Susan doesn't know where I am, she said. I told her I was visiting a friend. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. She knows something's wrong, I said. She called me. Ellen swallowed. I didn't want to drag you into it, she said. After everything, I let out a bitter laugh. You married me, I said. You dragged me in 38 years ago. When we got home, the house felt different. Not empty anymore. Heavy. Ellen sat at the kitchen table, the same place she'd been crying the night before. You need to tell Susan the truth, I said. Ellen nodded slowly. I will, she said. Tomorrow, I shook my head. Tonight, I said. Secrets are what got us here. Susan arrived an hour later. She looked confused, then angry, then scared, all within seconds of seeing Ellen. Where were you? She demanded. Ellen stood up. I was wrong, she said. About everything. Susan crossed her arms. That's not an answer, she said. Ellen took a breath. The test was yours, she said. Susan froze. Her face drained of color. I told you not to touch it, Susan said sharply. I told you to stay out of it. Ellen's voice cracked. You're my daughter, she said. I couldn't ignore it. Susan looked at me then, panic in her eyes. You told him, she asked. Ellen nodded. Susan sank into a chair. Oh God, she whispered. I spoke gently. Who's the father? I asked. Susan hesitated. Then she said the name. It was someone I knew, someone I trusted, someone who'd been in our home. The room went silent. My chest felt tight. Does his wife know? I asked. Susan shook her head. He said he'd ruin me if I told. She said, he said no one would believe me. Ellen reached for Susan's hand. That's why I left, she said. He warned me. He said if I didn't disappear, he'd make things worse. Susan started crying then. Real crying. I never wanted this, she said. I just wanted it to stop. I looked at both of them, and felt something hard settle inside me. Fear, yes, but also clarity. This ends now, I said. They both looked at me. He doesn't control this family, I continued, and he doesn't get to decide what disappears. Ellen opened her mouth. I held up a hand. Tomorrow, I said. We talked to a lawyer. Susan sniffed. What if he comes after us? She asked. I shook my head. Then he'll be walking into the wrong house. I said, that night, after Susan left, Ellen sat beside me on the couch. I thought I was saving her, she said quietly. I took her hand. You were, I said. You just chose the wrong way. She leaned her head on my shoulder. For the first time in days, the house felt still. But sleep didn't come easily, because somewhere out there, a man knew his secret was cracking. And men like that don't stay quiet when they feel control slipping away. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch with my eyes closed, listening to Ellen's breathing from the bedroom down the hall, replaying Susan's face when she said his name, a man I had shaken hands with, a man who had sat at our table during holidays, a man whose laugh I recognized instantly. That was the part that wouldn't let my mind rest. Evil didn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it showed up smiling, carrying a bottle of wine, at around 4:30 in the morning. My phone vibrated. I didn't need to look to know it wasn't good news. I stepped into the kitchen so Ellen wouldn't hear and answered quietly. Hello? I said. There was a pause. Then a man's voice, calm and deliberate. Mr. Harris, he said. We need to clear something up. My jaw tightened. "Who is this?" I asked, though I already knew. He chuckled softly. "You know who it is," he said, "and I think you understand why I'm calling." I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge hard enough to feel it bite into my palm. "If this is about my family," I said, "you shouldn't be calling this number." Another pause. Then, "Your family is exactly why I'm calling," he replied. I didn't raise my voice. "Men like him fed on that. You've said enough to my wife." I said, "You've said enough to my daughter. You don't get to say anything else." He sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I'm trying to keep things simple," he said. "But simple requires cooperation." "What do you want?" I asked. "Silence," he said. "And distance." Ellen made a smart decision leaving for a bit. It showed good judgment. My blood ran cold. "You stay away from her," I said. He laughed again. "You don't get to set terms," he said. "You get to choose outcomes." Before I could respond, the call ended. I stared at my phone, my reflection faintly visible in the dark screen. I was shaking now, not with fear exactly, but with something close to it. Anger sharpened by clarity. The kind that doesn't explode. The kind that settles in and waits. When Ellen came into the kitchen an hour later, she knew immediately. "He called, didn't he?" she asked. I nodded. She sank into a chair. "I knew he would," she said. "That's why I didn't want you involved." I sat across from her. "That ship sailed the moment he threatened my family," I said. By mid-morning, Susan arrived again. Eyes red, shoulders tense. I told her about the call. She went pale. "He said he'd do this," she whispered. "He said, if anyone talked, he'd make us regret it." Ellen reached for her. "We're not alone anymore," she said. "Your father's here." Susan looked at me like she was seeing me differently. Not just as dad, as something else. Something steadier. We spent the next hour making calls. A lawyer first. Then another. I didn't explain everything on the phone. I just said we needed advice, and we needed it fast. The third lawyer agreed to meet that afternoon. His office was small, unremarkable. That was a good sign. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable as Ellen and Susan told their story. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You did the right thing coming here," he said. Susan shook her head. "It doesn't feel like it," she said. He nodded. "That's normal," he replied. Then, he looked at me. "Has he contacted you directly?" I told him about the call. The lawyer's expression hardened slightly. "That helps," he said. "More than you think." "How?" I asked. He folded his hands. "Because it establishes intimidation," he said. "And intimidation leaves trails." Ellen frowned. "What if he denies it?" she asked. The lawyer smiled faintly. "People like him always do," he said. "That's why we don't rely on their honesty." On the drive home, Susan was quiet. Finally she said, "What if this ruins everything?" I glanced at her. "Some things deserve to be ruined," I said, "especially lies." She nodded slowly, staring out the window. That evening, just as the sun was going down, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. My stomach tightened. I motioned for Ellen and Susan to stay back, and opened it. A woman stood there, mid-50s, well-dressed, eyes tired in a way I recognized immediately. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "Are you David Harris?" "I am," I replied cautiously. She took a breath. "My name is Karen," she said. "I'm married to a man who's been lying to both of our families." My heart started pounding. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. Ellen and Susan came into view as Karen entered. The moment Karen saw Susan, her eyes filled with tears. "I was hoping it wasn't you," she said softly. Susan froze. Ellen moved closer to her. "What do you mean?" Ellen asked. Karen pulled a folded stack of papers from her purse. "Because if it's you," she said, "then everything my husband told me is a lie." She looked at me then, and I think we've all been played. The room fell silent as she placed the papers on the table. Phone records, messages, dates, proof, more than I'd expected. Karen exhaled slowly. He thinks he's untouchable, she said. But he made one mistake. I met her gaze. What mistake? I asked. He underestimated how tired I am of cleaning up his messes, she said. And in that moment, I realized something important. We weren't facing him alone anymore. The balance had shifted, and he didn't even know it yet. Karen didn't sit right away. She stood there by the table, her purse still clutched in one hand, like she wasn't sure if she trusted the floor beneath her feet. Ellen pulled out a chair for her anyway. Please, Ellen said gently. Sit. Karen hesitated, then did, laying the stack of papers flat between us like evidence already prepared for trial. I didn't come here to cause trouble, Karen said. Her voice was steady, but it had that thin edge people get when they've already cried all the tears they had. I came because I finally realized trouble was already here. I was just the last one pretending not to see it. Susan stared at the papers without touching them. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Karen looked at her, really looked at her, and sighed. Longer than I want to admit, she said. But knowing something feels different when it stops being abstract, when it gets a face, a family. I reached forward and flipped through the pages. Call logs, screenshots, hotel confirmations, dates that lined up too well with what Ellen and Susan had already told me. This wasn't suspicion. This was a map. Why bring this to us? I asked. Karen met my eyes. Because he's dangerous when cornered, she said. And because I know his patterns. If he thinks he can silence you, he'll try. If he thinks you'll expose him, he'll escalate. Ellen's hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the table. He already has, she said. He called my husband last night. Karen nodded. That means he's panicking, she said. Which means we're ahead of him for once. Susan finally picked up one of the pages. Does he know you're here? She asked. Karen shook her head. No, she said. And I intend to keep it that way for now. We talked for over an hour about timelines, about what had been said and what hadn't, about threats implied but never written down. Karen filled in gaps we didn't even know existed. She explained how he compartmentalized his life, how he relied on people's reluctance to cause scenes, how he counted on shame to keep women quiet. Listening to her was like hearing a manual written by someone who'd survived the machine. At one point, Ellen asked the question. We'd all been circling. What do you want to do? Karen didn't answer immediately. She looked at Susan instead. What do you want? She asked her. Susan swallowed. I want him to stop, she said. I want my life back. Karen nodded. That's reasonable, she said. But stopping him doesn't come from disappearing. It comes from exposure, after Karen left. Promising to stay in contact but urging caution. The house felt different again, not calm, but aligned, like we were finally facing the same direction. Susan sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest. I'm scared, she admitted. I sat beside her. That means you're paying attention, I said. Fear isn't weakness. It's information. That night, Ellen and I talked longer than we had in years, not about logistics, about guilt, about the choices she'd made, thinking she was protecting our daughter. I thought if I carried it, she said quietly. If I held the burden, Susan could breathe. I took her hand. You carried too much, I said, and you shouldn't have had to. The next morning things moved fast. Our lawyer called with updates. Karen had sent him everything she had. He sounded energized in a way I didn't expect. This isn't just leverage, he said. This is structure, patterns, and threats. He paused. There's also something else. My stomach tightened. What? I asked. He's under review at work, the lawyer said. Separate issue. Unsumted. Discrepancies. Nothing proven yet. But combined with this, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. By midday, Susan received a message. Unknown number. Just 3 words, we need to talk. She showed it to me without saying anything. I stared at the screen. Don't reply, I said. Not yet. She nodded, but her hands were shaking. Ellen wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You don't owe him anything, she said. Not a word. That afternoon, Karen called again. He knows something's shifting, she said. He hasn't figured out what yet, but he will. I asked her how she knew. Because he just accused me of turning against him, she said. Which means he's counting bodies and realizing some are missing. That evening, as the sun dipped low, there was another knock at the door. This one softer, measured. I opened it to find a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Late 40s, clean cut. Professional smile. Mr. Harris? He asked. I'm looking for Susan. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. She's not available, I said. The man nodded, unbothered. I represent a mutual acquaintance, he said. He'd like to resolve a misunderstanding quietly. I felt my jaw tighten. There's no misunderstanding, I said, and nothing about this is quiet anymore. The man studied me for a moment, then leaned in slightly. You don't want to make this bigger than it has to be, he said. I held his gaze. You should tell your client he already did. I replied. The man straightened, his smile gone. Very well, he said. But understand this. Once certain doors open, they don't close. I shrugged. Then maybe it's time some fresh air got in, I said. He left without another word. Inside, Susan looked at me, eyes wide. Was that him? She asked. Someone like him, I said. Ellen exhaled slowly. They're pushing, she said. That means they're losing, I replied. But even as I said it, I knew better than to relax. Men who lose control don't always retreat. Sometimes they lash out, and whatever came next, it wasn't going to be subtle. The house stayed quiet after the man in the suit left, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that made every sound feel louder than it should be. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Susan sat at the table scrolling her phone, without really looking at it, like she was waiting for something else to appear. Ellen stood at the window, watching the street, arms crossed tightly against her chest. He knows where we live, Susan said, finally. Yes, I replied. And he knew that before today. That didn't make her feel better. I could tell. Fear doesn't work like logic. It doesn't respond to reassurance. It responds to patterns, and right now the pattern was escalation. Calls, messages, lawyers, strangers at the door. This wasn't a mistake anymore. It was pressure. That night, Ellen barely ate. She pushed food around her plate, lost in her thoughts, when Susan went home, promising to lock her doors and call if anything felt off. Ellen and I sat in the living room with the lights low. I never imagined it would come to this, she said quietly. I thought the worst thing was that test in the trash. She shook her head. I was so wrong. I reached for her hand. You saw a problem and tried to solve it alone, I said. That's not a crime. But the man who caused it. I paused. He made it one. At 11:18 p.m., my phone rang again. Same unknown number as before. I looked at Ellen. She nodded once. Put it on speaker, she said. I did. Mr. Harris, his voice said smoothly, like we were old friends. I was hoping you'd be reasonable. I'm listening, I replied. I've sent someone to speak with you, he said. That should tell you I want this handled cleanly. You sent someone to threaten my family, I said. He laughed softly. Threaten? No. Advise. There was a pause. Your daughter is fragile right now. Public scrutiny wouldn't be good for her. You understand that, don't you? Ellen leaned forward. You don't get to talk about my daughter, she said sharply. Another pause. Longer this time. I see, he said. So she's listening now? His tone hardened slightly. Let me be very clear. If this goes further, everyone loses. Jobs, reputations, families. And if it doesn't, I asked, then we all move on, he said, quietly. I felt something settle in my chest. Calm. You're wrong, I said. Only one person's been losing here, and it's not you. Ellen squeezed my hand. The call ended without a goodbye. We didn't sleep much after that. Around dawn, Ellen made coffee we barely drank. We need to change the locks, she said. Today, I nodded. And cameras, I added. Inside and out. She looked at me. Do you think he'd actually come here? She asked. I thought about his voice. His confidence. I think he likes to feel close, I said, even when he doesn't act. By mid-morning the locksmith had come and gone. The cameras were scheduled for installation the next day. I called the lawyer again and told him about the calls, the visitor. Everything. He was quiet for a long moment. That helps us, he said finally. It's a pattern of intimidation, and it's sloppy. I frowned. Sloppy? I asked. Men who think they're untouchable stop being careful, he replied. That afternoon, Karen called. He's unraveling, she said. He accused me of conspiring against him. I almost laughed. Almost. He's not wrong, I said. Karen exhaled. Be careful, she warned. When he feels cornered, he gets reckless. At 3:42 p.m., Susan called me, her voice tight. Dad. She said, he's outside my building. My heart jumped. Where are you? I asked. Inside, she said. I didn't answer the door. Good, I said. Don't. I stayed on the line with her until she heard him leave. She was shaking when she finally spoke again. He smiled, she said. Like this was a game that did it. I called the lawyer back immediately. We're done waiting, I said. So are you? He replied. So are you, he replied. I was just about to call you. He explained that Karen's documents, combined with Susan's account and the recorded calls, were enough to file a formal complaint and request a protective order. Once that happens, he said, he won't be knocking on doors anymore. He'll be answering questions. When Ellen came home from the grocery store, I told her everything. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She nodded slowly. Then let's do it, she said. All of it. That evening, Susan came over again. We sat at the table and signed statements, dates, times. Exact words. Susan's hand trembled as she wrote, but she didn't stop. When she finished, she looked up at me. I'm tired of being afraid, she said. I nodded. Me too, I said. The next morning our lawyer filed the paperwork. By noon the calls stopped. No messages, no unknown numbers, no cars idling outside. The silence was sudden and unnerving, like the pause before something breaks. Ellen noticed it too. I don't like this, she said. I don't either, I replied. But it doesn't mean nothing's happening. At 4:07 p.m., Karen texted one line. He's been served. I stared at the message for a long time before showing it to Ellen. She let out a breath she'd been holding for days. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said slowly, he realizes he's not in control anymore. That night, as I locked the doors and checked the cameras for the third time, I felt something unfamiliar. Not relief. Not yet, but resolve. Whatever came next, it would happen in the open, and men like him don't survive daylight very well. The first thing that changed was the way the days felt. Time didn't stretch the way it had before. It compressed. Every hour carried weight. Every ring of the phone made us pause. Even though it stayed quiet, Ellen kept busy, almost deliberately so, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, reorganizing drawers that had been fine for years. Susan came by every afternoon after work, like an unspoken agreement had been made. No one said it out loud, but we were staying close on purpose. 2 days after Karen's message, the lawyer called again. His tone was different this time. Focused, controlled. He's retained counsel, he said. High profile, aggressive. I expected that. Men like him didn't face consequences quietly. He's denying everything, the lawyer continued. Calling it a misunderstanding. Claiming harassment. I let out a short breath. Of course he is, I said. What does that mean for us? Ellen asked. Leaning toward the phone, the lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. It means this won't be quick. He said, and it means he's going to try to shift the narrative. Susan stiffened. How? She asked. By painting you as unstable, he replied. By suggesting regret, confusion, coercion, anything that introduces doubt. After the call, the room felt heavier. Susan stared at the floor. He always said no one would believe me, she murmured. Ellen moved closer to her. That's how control works, she said. He planted that fear so you'd never test it. I watched my daughter's shoulders rise and fall as she breathed through it. But Karen believes me. Susan said softly. You believe me? I nodded. And that matters more than you think, I said. That evening, Karen came over again. She looked tired, but there was something different in her eyes. Resolve, maybe, or relief. He's furious, she said. Once she sat down. I've never seen him like this. Ellen frowned. Is that dangerous? She asked. Karen considered the question. It can be, she said. But it's also when people make mistakes. Karen told us he'd tried to confront her that morning, showing up unannounced at her sister's house, demanding to know what she'd done. I didn't open the door, Karen said. I called the police. Susan's eyes widened. What happened? She asked. Karen smiled faintly. He left before they arrived, she said. He hates witnesses. The next week moved in fits and starts. There were meetings with the lawyer, calls with investigators, long conversations about things that were uncomfortable to say out loud. Susan struggled the most with the repetition, with having to explain herself again and again to strangers. It feels like I'm the one on trial, she said. One night, her voice cracking. I put my hand on her shoulder. That's how the system feels sometimes, I said. But it's not the truth. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. Mark called. My son rarely called during the workday. Dad, he said, without preamble, I heard something from a coworker about Susan. My heart sank. What did you hear? I asked carefully. He hesitated. That she's involved in some kind of scandal. With a married man. I closed my eyes. And, I said, and that you and Mom are backing her up, he continued. People are talking. When I told Susan about the call, she went very still. So it started, she said. Ellen clenched her jaw. He's spreading it, she said. Twisting it. Karen nodded. That's his move, she said. If he controls the story, he controls the damage. That night we made a decision, a hard one. The lawyer had suggested it days earlier, but we hadn't been ready. Now we were going to stop reacting and start speaking. Karen agreed to go first. She had the most distance, the least to lose socially, and the clearest documentation. She contacted a journalist she trusted, someone who had handled sensitive cases before. Not for spectacle, Karen said. For accuracy. Susan listened quietly as we discussed it. Finally, she said, I'll do it too, if she does. Ellen looked at her sharply. You don't have to, she said. Susan shook her head. I'm done hiding, she replied. The interview was scheduled for the following week. Until then, we waited. 3 days before it aired. He broke his silence publicly. A statement was released through his attorney, denying allegations, expressing deep concern for false narratives, and asking for privacy. It was polished. Professional. Empty. Karen laughed when she read it. That's not for us, she said. That's for his board. Susan didn't laugh. She barely slept. The night before the interview, she sat on the couch beside me, her hands twisting in her lap. "What if this ruins my life?" she asked. I didn't lie to her. "It will change it," I said. "But it won't end it." She nodded slowly. "I don't want to be brave," she said. "I just don't want to be scared anymore." I squeezed her hand. "Sometimes that's the same thing," I said. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. We watched it together. No commentary, no dramatic music, just facts, timelines, messages. Karen spoke calmly. Susan spoke carefully. When the anchor asked Susan why she was coming forward now, she paused, then said, "Because silence protected the wrong person." By morning everything exploded. Calls, emails, messages from people we hadn't heard from in years. Some supportive, some cruel. Mark called again. His voice strained. "I didn't know," he said. "I'm sorry." Susan listened quietly. When the call ended, she said, "I don't need everyone to understand. I just need them to stop lying." By noon, his company announced he was stepping aside pending review. Karen forwarded the statement with a single word: "Finally." That evening, as we sat around the table, exhausted but strangely lighter, Ellen spoke softly. "Do you feel that?" she asked. I nodded. "It's the weight lifting," I said. Susan looked at both of us. "Is it over?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "But it's turning. And for the first time since the night I found that test in the trash, I believed it." The days after the interview felt unreal, like we were living inside someone else's story. Everywhere Susan went, people recognized her, not always kindly. Sometimes it was a look held a second too long at the grocery store. Sometimes it was a whispered comment she pretended not to hear. Other times, it was a quiet, "I'm sorry," from someone who looked genuinely shaken. All of it took a toll. Courage looks strong from the outside, but it's exhausting to live inside. Ellen stayed close to Susan, driving her to work, waiting outside when meetings ran late. "Just for a little while," she said, but we all knew it was about more than convenience. It was about safety. It was about reminding Susan she wasn't alone, not for 1 second. I watched them from the sidelines sometimes, my wife and my daughter walking side by side, and felt a mix of pride and regret. Pride that they were strong. Regret that they ever had to be. Karen called almost daily. She had become something like a bridge between us and the wider world, translating legal updates and media noise into plain language. "He's trying to negotiate," she said one afternoon, through back channels. Ellen scoffed. "Negotiate what?" Karen's voice hardened. "Silence," she said. "He still thinks this ends if people stop talking." That same day, our lawyer confirmed what Karen suspected. "There's been an offer," he said carefully. "Non-disclosure agreements. Financial compensation." Susan's face went pale when she heard. "So he can just buy his way out?" she asked. The lawyer shook his head. "Not without your consent," he said. "And even then it wouldn't stop the investigations already underway." I looked at Susan. "You don't owe him anything," I said again. She nodded. "I know," she replied. "But it's still terrifying to hear." The pressure came from unexpected places too. A distant cousin called Ellen, suggesting maybe Susan should take a break from being so visible. An old friend asked me if we were sure we wanted to drag this out. Every comment carried the same message. Discomfort. People didn't like stories that forced them to pick sides. They preferred neat endings. We didn't have one yet. Then, one evening, Susan didn't come home on time. She was supposed to be back by 6. At 7, her phone went straight to voicemail. Ellen tried not to panic. I could see it in her eyes anyway. At 7:23, my phone rang. Unknown number. My chest tightened. As I answered, "Hello?" I said. "Mr. Harris?" A woman's voice said, calm, official. "This is Officer Reynolds with the city police. Your daughter has been in an accident." The world narrowed to a single point. "Is she alive?" I asked. There was a brief pause. Yes, the officer said. She's shaken but physically unharmed. We'd like you to come down to the station. At the station, Susan sat wrapped in a blanket, her face pale but composed. Ellen rushed to her, holding her tightly. What happened? Ellen asked over and over. Susan took a breath. Someone followed me, she said quietly. From work. My jaw clenched. Did you recognize them? I asked. She nodded. I think so, she said. It was one of his associates, the man who came to the house. The officers explained that Susan had noticed the car and driven straight to the police station instead of home. The car had peeled away when it realized where she was headed. You did exactly the right thing, Officer Reynolds told her. Susan nodded, but her hands were shaking. I was scared, she said. I didn't know what he'd do. That night, fear returned in full force. Ellen barely let Susan out of her sight. I installed additional cameras myself, double-checking every lock. Karen arrived late, having rushed over when she heard. This is escalation, she said grimly. He's trying to intimidate without leaving fingerprints. The next morning our lawyer moved quickly. A temporary restraining order was filed and granted. Susan was advised to work remotely. Karen was placed under similar protection. He's running out of options, the lawyer said, and that makes him unpredictable. Then came the call that changed everything. It was Karen again, but her voice was different this time, almost disbelieving. They found something, she said. Financial records, offshore accounts, payments that don't line up. She paused. This isn't just about us anymore. By the end of the week, the story had shifted. What started as a personal scandal was now being reported as part of a broader investigation. Headlines changed, language changed. The focus moved away from Susan and onto him. His name appeared alongside words like probe and irregularities. For the first time, Susan read an article about the situation without flinching. Mark came to visit that weekend. He hugged Susan tightly, tears in his eyes. I should have been here sooner, he said. Susan shook her head. You're here now, she replied. The family felt whole in a way it hadn't. In months, maybe years. Still, none of us relaxed. We knew better, and we were right not to. Late Sunday night, Ellen woke me up. David, she whispered urgently. Someone's outside. I grabbed my phone and checked the camera feed. A figure stood at the edge of our driveway, partially obscured by shadow. He wasn't moving, just standing there staring at the house. I called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, the figure was gone, but he'd left something behind, an envelope on the mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no letterhead, no signature. This didn't have to be this way. Ellen's hands trembled as she read it. Susan's eyes filled with tears. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. This wasn't a plea. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning, and it told me something important. He was scared, and scared men make mistakes. They can't undo. The envelope sat on the kitchen table all night, untouched, like it might move if we turned our backs. No one suggested throwing it away. No one suggested keeping it either. It was simply there, a reminder that even now, even after everything, he still believed he deserved the last word. Ellen was the one who finally broke the silence. He wants us afraid, she said quietly. That's all this is. I nodded. And he wants control, I added. This is what control looks like when it's slipping. The police took the note the next morning. Photos were taken, statements recorded. The officer didn't promise miracles, but his tone was different than it would have been weeks earlier. More serious, more alert. He's not being subtle, he said. That helps. Susan listened from the couch, wrapped in a blanket, even though the room was warm. She looked tired in a way. Sleep couldn't fix. Still, there was something else there too. Resolve. The kind that comes after you've been scared for too long. By midweek, the pressure on him intensified. His company announced a formal internal investigation, independent of the ongoing legal matters. Karen called to tell us he'd moved out of their house. He didn't tell me, she said. I found out from a neighbor. Her voice wasn't angry. Just done. He's running, I said. Karen didn't disagree. Yes, she replied. But he's running out of places to hide. Susan met with the investigators that Friday. Ellen went with her, sitting just outside the room the entire time. When Susan finally came out, she looked drained, but lighter. They listened, she said simply. They really listened. Ellen hugged her tightly, tears spilling freely now. Not from fear this time. From release. The turning point came quietly, without drama, no sirens. No headlines at first, just a call from our lawyer late one afternoon. He's been arrested, he said. Not for what he did to Susan. I felt my heart skip. Then what? I asked. Financial crimes, he replied. Fraud, obstruction. Evidence tampering, he paused. They got him coming and going. The news spread fast after that. Faster than any rumor ever had. This time, it was facts. Charges, court dates. The language was different now. Careful, heavy. Susan watched the coverage without saying a word. When it ended, she turned to me. Is it really over? She asked. I thought about it for a moment. For him, I said. Yes, she exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for months. The weeks that followed were quieter. Not perfect. Not magically healed, but quieter. Susan returned to work slowly, on her own terms. Some relationships had changed forever. Others surprised us by growing stronger. Ellen and I started taking walks again in the evenings, something we'd stopped doing without realizing it. The house felt like ours again. Not a shelter, not a battlefield. Karen finalized her separation and moved into a small place near the river. I can finally breathe, she told us over coffee one afternoon. I didn't realize how long I'd been holding it in. Susan smiled at her. You saved me, she said softly. Karen shook her head. We saved each other, she replied. One evening, months later, Susan sat with me on the back porch as the sun went down. You know, she said. I used to think strength meant not needing help. I waited. Now I think it means knowing when to ask. She finished. I smiled. That's a hard lesson, I said. But a good one. Ellen joined us, handing Susan a mug of tea. They sat together, shoulder to shoulder, comfortable in the silence. I watched them and thought about that night in the kitchen. The crying, the dishes, the trash. How something so small had cracked open a truth so big. Life doesn't always announce its turning points. Sometimes it whispers them from the bottom of a garbage bag. The last we heard, he had accepted a plea deal, long enough to matter, public enough to count. His name faded from conversation, the way all disgraced names eventually do, not forgotten. Just stripped of power. Susan kept the restraining order in place. Not because I'm afraid, she said, because I'm careful now. I understood that. Careful wasn't weakness. Careful was earned. On our anniversary, Ellen and I went out to dinner for the first time in a long while. Halfway through the meal, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you for not looking away, she said. I swallowed. Thank you for coming back, I replied. We sat there a moment longer, letting the weight of it all settle into something gentler. When we got home that night, I took out the trash. Habit, more than anything. As I tied the bag, I paused. Just for a second. Then I smiled to myself and carried it outside. Some things don't haunt you anymore once you face them head on. What we went through didn't make us special. It made us honest. About fear, about family, about how easily silence protects the wrong people. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. The truth doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs someone willing to hold on to it when it's uncomfortable. And sometimes that's enough to change everything.